Hello, thank you for joining me. I'm Scott Ryan. It's Friday and I'm looking back at today's news. And of course, more is coming out about Wednesday night's primary debate in Mesa, Arizona. The fact that Mitt Romney again was caught in a lie as he stood there on stage and indicated that in Massachusetts, Catholic hospitals were not forced to give out contraceptives and other items to which they object. This doesn't surprise me, and it doesn't surprise any of us. We know who this guy is. It's the same old story again. I've said this many times. I turned 18 in 1988. I lived my childhood with basically Ronald Reagan as president. I loved and admired that man. And when I turned 18, it was 1988. Reagan left office. I never had the privilege of voting for him. And in the last 23 years, not one time has the candidate whom I supported in the primary ever been the nominee. But every single time I've taken it for the team, so as they say. And I've listened to the nonsense about how if we don't vote for this nominee, if we don't throw our support on him, behind him, then look what we're going to get. It's the end of the world. I've ever since then been very active in politics. I've knocked on the doors literally. I've made the phone calls for hours. I've given the donations, grassroots, financial support, you name it. Look where it's gotten us. It's like an old school 70s hijacking. In a way, that's what the liberal establishment, the moderates as they call them, have been doing to us. The majority. For the last 23 years, they have told us, you're going to support this guy or else. Despite the fact that conservatives are the majority. This tail wagging the dog has gone on. And they've gotten away with it. They've told us that things are going to get better each time. But look where we are. We had 8 years of President Bush. We had the majority in the House and the Senate. Yet here we find ourselves going bankrupt as a nation. Obama, of course, is doing everything that he can to expedite that, and that was his intention from day one. This Romney notion that he's in above his head is an egregious display of credulity that is inexcusable. Of course, anyone who is rational can see that every single thing that this man has done from the beginning he took office has been to undermine and destroy everything that made America what it is. Conservatives are getting frustrated because we've allowed ourselves to be manipulated by these liberals who think we're just going to get in line after they hijack our party once again. And I really got to thinking. Conservatives, let me share this quote with you. It's one that I'm sure you will recognize. And I think it really summarizes our situation right now. This quote came from a cartoonist back in the early 1950s. Most people in my generation never heard of him. He was a former animator at Walt Disney, where he got his start, and he participated, of course, in the Disney classics like Cinderella. And he later left Disney and went on to publish a cartoon that he created called Pogo. What he says here really summarizes our plight. The quote, as you know it, over the years began to be reformed into a final form which most of us would recognize. And there was some controversy and debate over where it actually took place, how it originated. The actual creator of the comic strip, Walt Kelly himself, wrote a piece to settle the argument. And he said, in the time of Joseph McCarthyism, celebrated in Pogo strip by a character named Simple J. Malarkey, I attempted to explain each individual is wholly involved in the democratic process. Work at it or no. The result of the process fall on the head of the public. And he who is recalcitrant or procrastinates in raising his voice can blame no one but himself. In an introduction to Pogo Papers, published by Simon & Schuster in 1952 through 53, he said in part, quote, "Specializations and markings of individuals everywhere abound in such profusion that major idiosyncrasies can be properly ascribed to the mass. Traces of nobility, gentleness, and courage persist in all people. Do what we will to stamp out the trend. So too do the characteristics which are ugly. It is just unfortunate that in the clumsy hands of the cartoonist, all traits become ridiculous, leading to a certain amount of self-conscious expostulation and desire to join the battle." Kelly says, "There is no need to sally forth, for it remains true that those things which make us human are, curiously enough, always close at hand. Resolve, then, that on this very ground, with small flags waving and tiny blasts of tiny trumpets, we shall meet the enemy. And not only may he be ours, he may be us." Walt Kelly said, "As years passed, the final paragraph was reduced to, 'We have met the enemy, and he is us.'" That really hits home to me. I think it explains our situation as conservatives. For the past almost 24 years since Reagan left office, we have allowed ourselves to be hijacked by the minority. We have allowed this liberal tail to wag the dog in the Republican Party. We can control this. We have the ability. We know how to do it. To look at this guy and see how obvious it is that he is a phony, that his entire governmental career was nothing but leftist compromise, was nothing but betraying the principles that are the foundation of our party platform. We see this, and we see the crushes by the moderate media. We see how impenetrable they are, their minds, to look at the glaringly obvious facts, like anyone caught up in a manipulative cult. And we've been banging our heads off the wall. Day after day, week after week, for months, we've been fighting this. For what? A few points? The guy is in the mid-30s, under 40, 40 at best. Focusing too much on Mitt Romney, I believe, is perhaps giving him undeserved gravity. It's actually adding an air of legitimacy to him that he simply does not deserve. We have devised a strategy, and it is circulating, and it's not something really esoteric. It's common sense. We conservatives have two candidates, and we know they're conservatives by the body, the totality of their work, decades of it. Yes, they've made some little faux pas. Yes, Romney has been able to lie and use his typical methods of half-truths and distortions to take little morsels out of their decades in public service to make it look like that summarizes the body of their work. Whereas he has to totally lie and circumvent and attack other people with his hundreds of millions of dollars just to avoid being accountable for his own. It is very clear when we look at the North, the South, the East, and the West, Mitt Romney is vulnerable. Mitt Romney is supported by the deluded minority and those who have vested interests that look forward to appointments and careers, betraying our country again and again, just like the liberals before them. All we have to do right now is resolve that we are going to put a stop to this. Enough is enough. It is very clear that Mitt Romney would be dealt a mortal blow if the conservative majority would simply defeat him in Michigan, in Arizona. That would be the death knell. It is very clear who the front runner is, and it happens to be Rick Santorum in Michigan and Arizona. It is very clear that Newt Gingrich has a number of states in the West, in the South, major states, where he is the clear front runner. We know these two men are the conservatives. All we have to do is defeat the enemy, which is ourselves, and get over our own crushes. This isn't about either candidate. I will support either one of them vehemently. I will put everything I have behind them, every minute I have to spare when one of them wins the nomination. But we have to stop taking this on the chin. We've heard the old definition of insanity, as they say. I hate that platitude, but they say that the definition of insanity is repeating the same mistake over and over again and expecting different results. Well, that's not the definition. I would say that's a consequence or a symptom of insanity, but nevertheless, the point is true. We have to get behind the candidates with the clear lead in those respective states and make this an election not about our own particular choice, but make this an election about defeating the socialist grip on this party. And I've seen this message resonate. I put this out in my video a few days ago, and I'll link that here at tableofwisdom.com. If you want to spread that and put it on your Facebook account, spread the word, because the elections are coming up this Tuesday. This is about us. We have been our own enemy. There's only one liberal left in this race. We need to coalesce behind the candidate who leads in each state by a large proportion until we can figure this out, take Romney out of this race, vote for Santorum in Michigan. Let's take this one state at a time. And if we can, Arizona as well. I mean, those voters are so impetuous and unpredictable. There's something very odd and peculiar about that state, so I wouldn't count on anything there. But if there are enough sensible conservatives, and I know there are some out there, if we can manage to give Santorum Arizona, it's all over. That's the death knell. But we need to work together. Elections are Tuesday. This is all about a few points. Conservatives, do we want to win this or not? Do we want to take the liberal out of the race or not? Do we want to find ourselves in November wallowing and complaining about the liberal hijacking of this party by a minority when we have every opportunity to use our brains and finally get the job done? We've got to spread the word. We've got to do it quickly. We can make this a landslide if we would just abandon our own personal prejudices or infatuations and stand behind the conservative in each race. Right now, take a snapshot and stand behind the conservative that has the best chance in each respective state. Thank you for joining me. I'm Scott Ryan.